Cool. Okay, so let me just do a quick introduction. So, Barbara is an international peace activist, an award-winning author, psychic channel, workshop facilitator, and intuitive teacher with decades of experience in the intuitive arts. She's best known as the co-founder of Conflict Revolution, a transformative approach that teaches people to resolve inner conflict as a pathway to personal, community, and global peace. And I think that's a great way to frame your very big bio, Barbara, really. So would you like
Well,
to kind of kick off, just kind of giving us your version of who you are and what you do, really, for the people that are listening?
sure. And thank you, Andy, for having me here for this conversation. I just think these conversations are so important right now in this world today. And yes, I have a very big, broad, sweeping bio that takes me all the way back to actually, I started out as a musician and I started writing music when I was about 12. And that process of writing music is very much channeling, just a different, medium that we're bringing through. And it was from there, and also working with the mother of a friend of mine in high school who was a psychic who did group channeling. And this is back in the early 70s. And
Right. Yeah.
so I got introduced to the whole process then. And it emerged as I went on. I was trying to be a rock star, and it started to be more a part of my life. And then I started automatic writing kind of spontaneously, and I knew what it was, but it was still kind of, shocking. And that's kind of how I got my start as a psychic. And then from there, all the hijinks started to take place.
So that's really interesting. So automatic writing it was the kind of opening point for you, was it really? Because I know again, I know we teach kind of spiritual progression, spiritual courses to people, and so many people wonder where they start. And I think people sometimes forget that going back to the old ways is actually a really good thing to do. And automatic writing is a great way to start to kind of channel, for yourself. Just pick the pen up and write. So it's really interesting that that was your opening point, really. So you weren't hearing voices at that point or having telepathic conversation with guides and such like. It was more
No,
intuitive.
it was really because my mentor said she was an antenna. So we weren't talking to anybody but me, my higher self coming through her. And so when I started to automatic write quite spontaneously, I wasn't trying. I was actually writing kind of an angry letter to a friend of mine. And it just, so I knew what it was. But I would, as I teach people how to channel, I did a whole classroom of automatic writing, because you can't just sit down and go, okay, I'm going to automatic write here. It's a really studied process. And I don't know about you, when your gifts sort of became apparent to you, surely there was a learning curve of, what is this? How do I do it? Well, what am I meant to do with it? How do I keep doing it? So, but I encourage everyone, because I think all of us innately, well, I know all of us innately have within us a piece, we call it a human dimension of intuition. So, just a matter of tapping into it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way to frame it, Barbara, really. I mean, my belief is the same. Everyone is we're all telepathic, we're all spiritual. We have our physical body, we have the spiritual energy, which we can use different words to kind of frame in terms of spirit, or different people use different words from different cultures, backgrounds, and religions. But effectively, we kind of realize that we're not who we see in the mirror, and obviously connecting to the higher self, as you said, there are different ways to do that. But automatic writing is a really good learning curve, I think. And it's, again, everything has to be a process. You can't learn to be good at something if you don't practice. And obviously, automatic writing is one of those things that is a timeline, like everything, really.
Yeah. And I did, when I first started channeling, I did automatic writing for about a year. I would sit and people would come over and sit at my elbow, and I would write. And then after about a year, I thought, my mentor spoke. So I think I need to try to learn how to do that. It's kind of scary in a sense that when you're writing and you're putting it down on paper, there's kind of a distance from it. Like you're looking at it on the piece of paper. But when you start to speak and it's coming through you, now it's really a part of you and you kind of have to own it in a new way. But I did my first, where I was at a party and I invited everybody to just have an open mind. I have no idea what I'm doing, but let's see what happens. And afterwards, people were very, very moved. I was kind of surprised at how people were crying and how did you know that? And I remember, but I don't, it's not like I remember everything I say as if you and I had a conversation. So, yeah, that was the beginning of that learning curve.
Yeah, fabulous. I think that's the thing, isn't it? Again, automatic writing or learning to talk to guides, talk to spirit, talk to other energies. It's the same learning curve. For me, it was a kind of couple of year going to kind of regular weekly meditation groups. After work, I would always be tired. I would generally kind of fall asleep. By the time I arrived and you kind of start a meditation, then you kind of can't remember anything, then you come back and think, well, that was kind of waste of a week. And that happened continually. But of course you are progressing and you are moving in a different way, a different timeline. And then you start to actually hear the voices of the guides or your higher self. And you start to think, okay, I can hear something that isn't me consciously. So now we can really start to work with what information comes through. And I guess that's the key thing, isn't it, really? So how did you kind of quantify that early part of your journey that you knew you were channeling or talking to something positive compared to something negative or intrusive?
When I started channeling, especially speaking, for me, it was so much like singing and writing music. It was the same process, for years and years, especially as a young girl, I could hear I always said the songs were already written and I was just listening for them. And that's kind of what channeling felt like to me was I was listening for those voices. But I, as a antenna, like I was kind of okay. Like I didn't have to prove that it was anybody. This is what I do. I pick up this higher information and I send it back to you. But when I started to organize group channeling, I think in 93, I was working with two women, Kim and Teresa. We call ourselves the psychic sorority. And right off the bat, they ask in a channeling session with the three of us, well, who are you? And I was nervous because, like you said, first of all, how do you know who you, it, and secondly, what are they then, those whoever they are, going to say to us? And what they said was, you can call us angels. And I was a little skeptical of that as well. But the three of us decided in the long run, it would be the fruit of the information that would determine how we felt about it. And so far, everything that was being said was so high level and compassionate, and it was changing our lives so much for the better. And so we just thought, we don't care if it's the Easter Bunny, actually, because what we're learning is so positive and powerful and transformative.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Barbara. I think it's a great way to frame it, really, for everybody on that spiritual path and journey. Lots of people talk about channeling deities and big names and all sorts of things, and I've had the same opinion as you. Let's look at the output of what's being said. So let's not look at the name or the people or the wording. Let's look at the actual quality of the information that's coming through. And if it aligns positively, it will have a high vibration and we will simulate that and we'll think, yep, that works for me. If it's not positive or it's got a low vibration, then we'll reject it potentially. And that will point to the fact that it's probably more negative than positive. And that's kind of always been my temperature gauge on everything spiritual, really. If it feels okay and it's positive, then we can kind of assume it is, regardless of whether it's the Easter Bunny or not, really. But if it's negative or intrusive or feels off, then we have to assume the source of that information is off, and therefore it's probably negative. Is that your kind of version of things?
Pretty much. And the idea that this thing we're talking about, first of all, is so mysterious and it's so complex. And it's really guided by something so much greater than just our intellects thinking it through. But I think that skepticism is very, very healthy. And for me, being skeptical all the time at every juncture, because I went through a lot of training, I went through a lot of stuff that taught me some hard lessons, which was necessary for me to figure out, okay, what's my ego? Well, where am I maybe being driven by something that isn't of the highest good? Coming upon Kim and Teresa and having that association, and maybe you find this too with Jane, is when you have somebody else who's witnessing it and kind of participating in it, it's just a much better learning experience than sitting by myself in a room trying to figure out if I'm really what I'm really doing.
Yeah, and I think that is the whole thing, isn't it, Barbara? When you do this together with someone else, whether it's your partner, a friend, or you're part of a group, that whole kind of group energy keeps you kind of honest, really, because other people around you that you love and trust can actually say, "That's good. I like that. It feels good. It feels positive," or "I'm not so sure. We need to check. We need to be skeptical." And I think skeptics are great in the spiritual arena because they keep us all honest, effectively. So I kind of embrace, we get obviously lots of emails as you probably do every day, and some of them are positive, some of them are not so positive. But the ones that aren't particularly positive are generally skeptics that are made in their opinions of things, and that's kind of all it is their opinion. But they do keep us down that centre line because you have to wake up in the morning, look in the mirror with your own truth and integrity, and think we're here doing the right work in the right way, speaking the right things and doing the right things. And skeptics do keep us in that centre path really well, I think.
And it's one reason why, as I progressed, and the angels, that was a whole part of my learning experience. And that eventually led me to, which is, these are, stories, but it led me to learning that I could talk to people who had passed on. I was doing work with, I had a client who had an autistic son. He was 33, had never said a word. And she hired me to sit between him and channel him to her. And after a couple sessions, she was like, no, I've been talking to him. I know I have. And some people in Alzheimer's, comas. So I was learning I had this intuitive art. And then eventually that I could talk to people who had passed on. Teresa's mother came to me, and I had all of these training experiences that prepared me for then when I finally started to talk to, among others, Einstein. But it took me probably from the time that I first channeled Einstein to where I had a group where I actually came out of the closet and said, okay, these aren't angels anymore. This is Albert Einstein. It took me about 3 years because I was skeptical and I wanted to know, how would I know, even though, and Andy, when you're speaking truth, it's the truth that changes people or resonates with people. It's not me that does it. I'm the conduit. But when you're really speaking the truth and people feel it and they know it in their bones, it's the truth that speaks. So while I was intellectually skeptical, like, really, this is Einstein, it just resonated with me. And then over the course of many, many years, finally, last year, I presented at the Science of Consciousness conference in Barcelona on the 70th anniversary of Einstein's actual last words, that were read in 1955. And the room erupted. And it was like vindication for all of these years of my own skepticism. Going, okay, I knew it. I knew it was really him.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? Again, what as a channel, we just provide the channel for the information, and it's the receptive people that listen to it will decide whether it resonates with them or not, and therefore the information gets qualified by people that listen to what you say, effectively. And I think, would you say that is one of the hardest thing about being spiritual and being a channel is that you always kind of self-critique yourself to a certain degree?
Yes, and yet even when people through the years were coming back and telling me how powerful it was and that they were being changed by this, I think it's really good to have that self-critiquing because it keeps us humble. It keeps us honest and not trying to use our aggrandize ourselves and our gifts to advance some personal mission or desire or need. But it's more difficult. I think it's more difficult than a path than people from the outside see it as.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think again, trying to stay humble is, and again, when we look at some of these, some famous channelers, people that channel that we know, the big names, again, they all start somewhere with some body or something coming through them. They're delivering the information, and then they have to qualify that information and who that is. And it's hard to stay humble sometimes when you hear positive, reflection about the work that you do. We're all trying to keep our feet on the base ground, but we're also human, aren't we? And everyone likes to be told that what you've just done is good and people like it and they like to hear it. So there is that aspect of trying to keep yourself inside that box to a certain degree, but also to go out and face the world and do this sort of work, you have to be confident, and confidence can sometimes be seen as ego. And those two things kind of are part of a package, I guess, to a certain degree. But without confidence, then you can't let yourself go and actually do the work anyway. So it is walking that tightrope, isn't it, for most people?
Have you ever heard of the Aetherius Society?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay, so this was a guy in the 50s, and it's I think it started in the UK. His name is George King in the 50s, and he was visited by the Aetherius, I think, is a Venusian or some entity who came and said, "We're here to help bring world peace to the world, and you're going to be our channel." And there's actually they are still alive all around the world. And I went to the one in London a couple of years ago on his birthday, and
Right.
he's of course long dead, but they showed a video of a old film clip of him in his 70s, and somebody was asking him about this path because he was a very high level channel, and he basically, and I felt like he was looking right at me in the audience, and he said, kind of said, "It's been a hard road." And you think, oh, they can channel, they can do this, but it is really, I think it's a challenging thing. And I've been humbled down to, I just get more and more humbled as the years go on about what this gift has been. And that's my advice too to the youngins coming up is, give yourself a chance to fall down and learn and figure out what's ego and what's not ego. And at the root of everything is a mystery. So figure out how to accept the mystery while still building your worldview.
Well, yeah, well, I think that's a really good way to say it. I mean, I kind of see the spiritual path as this adventure, really, that we kind of we most people get pushed onto their spiritual path for some event that happens, normally through trauma, problems, pain, difficult circumstances, push people in a certain way, and then you end up on this path. And my guide Chen always says, the spiritual path is the loneliest path to walk because you're going to walk it on your own, and even though you may be around other people that have similar views and similar opinions, this is your personal experience and it's going to be your own path effectively. And I think that's one of the things that I've noticed over the course for me. I know you've been doing it a lot longer than me, but I've been on this path like a good 22 years probably now. But when I look back, there was no rush really. I was going to meditation groups, learning to channel automatic writing. I started to do as well for a year or so, and then channeled a book and that kind of thing through Chen. But what I kind of notice now is with the kind of advent of this explosion of interest really in the spiritual work on social media, everyone wants to be a channeler in kind of a week. Everyone, like do a week's course. And I look back and think, well, for me, that was years of weekly work, unpaid, spending money, going to groups, meditation groups, reading books. Nobody wants to read anything anymore either, particularly. So it's almost like the world has got to this point that everybody wants to fast track their spiritual development. And I think it's not a particularly good thing because, again, to learn to do these sorts of things, you have to give yourself time, as you just said, really.
Don't you think, though, that because of the years and years and years of people coming before and kind of opening up the energy and bringing forth this energy, that there's kind of more of a natural sense from the young people. I know you're young to me and others are young to you, of this kind of natural state where it isn't like they have to grind it out like we had to for, and the whole thing. I know there's training, but I just think some people are just so naturally so much more intuitive, so much more free to express their intuition. And that's why we're seeing this explosion, especially on social media, of all kinds of young people who want to tap in and be channels. And I think it's great because you're going to learn. It won't matter what I say. You're going to have a path that you'll learn, and you'll either rise or you'll fall. And then sometimes you'll fall and other times you'll rise. And then you'll get to a point, I think, where the humbleness of it gives you kind of a solid ground to operate from.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the energy's changed. Everything is faster now, and it's certainly, we run meditation courses, as I'm sure you do, and some of the people come on the course are able to meditate on week one. By week six, they'd like to be channeling their guides and connecting to, sort of deity type level entities, and you think, well, that's probably a bit quick in 6 weeks, really. But again, you start off and you teach them protection, teach them the key things they need to know, and then you kind of watch them go off. And as you say, some of them blossom and some fall, don't they? Because, of course, there is the imposter side, whereby imposter spirit and negative energies will pick up those that are kind of trying to run a bit too quick sometimes. Has that been your experience?
I think I think people have an idea. They see you or they see me, and then it's like, okay, I want to channel because I see you doing it, or I see her doing it, or this is how it's done. And yet everybody has to develop their own way that they communicate, who they're communicating with, how you're going to find that out. Like everybody has their own specific path, and you can't be comparing, really. I mean, you can, but I tell people, you're not going to channel like me. You're going to channel like you. And I want everybody to be more interested in, what does that mean? What is that voice, your voice coming out of you that's unique, but it's riskier. If you follow the crowd and you replicate something that's already popular, it's kind of like music has been, then you can get accepted. But this is not that path. I don't think. I think it's a path that has a much higher spirituality, and people will, if they go forward, like you're talking about, they want to do it the 6 weeks and then they keep going forward, they'll learn. And others who get frustrated because they're not being able to shape it, maybe like they thought it would be, they'll move on and use their intuitive gifts maybe for something else.
Yeah, that's really good. I think that's the whole thing, isn't it? None of us know our path, which is, I mean, that is the adventure of the spiritual arena, really, isn't it? That we don't really know what that path is likely to be and which direction that we're going to go into. I mean, I remember when I started to talk to my guide Chen, and we used to have these long conversations, and he used to kind of talk to me about the things that we planned to do. I never really believed most of the things that he said because it seemed too far off from where I was that would be the case, really. But you kind of realize they're looking at the roadmap that you don't have. And that is the whole thing, isn't it? Is that we don't have a view of our own roadmap. So we're kind of reliant on these guides. And as you said, when you connected to Einstein, I mean, that must have been a monumental surprise, I guess, on day one, really.
Well, what was most surprising was that when I was channeling Einstein, and it came about because I'd been invited by this tabloid in London. It was like a metaphysical tabloid in the 90s to talk to Princess Diana from beyond the grave. And I was so skeptical because this was the first time anybody had ever approached me with such a thing, and I didn't know what how would that happen. But I did that interview with her. And even though the tabloid didn't want it, my agent and I made this big list of, maybe there's other famous dead people you can talk to. And I'd go to them and imagine they would say yes or no. And so when I got to Einstein, he wasn't really even on our list, which was the sad part. But John F. Kennedy told us, we'll tell you who's coming up. And they said Einstein. And instead of automatic writing it, I spoke it. And when I started to speak it, it was the voice of all of my channeling. It was like like that was the most profound thing to me was, wait a minute, this is the voice of all the readings that I've been giving. What are you saying? And it 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 took me well, it was 98, I think that was, and then I published that book, Party of 12, the Afterlife Interviews, with that interview in 2001. And all up until that time, I wasn't even going to admit that I was talking to him, because it's just so crazy. What? You know? And then when 9/11 happened, I thought this information is so profound, and I need to come out of the closet. And so I pulled a big group together and confessed, here it is, Einstein. And since then, it's been just and I meant to ask you this too, about when Chen started and he's telling you these things and you're like, what? Uh, huh? So how has it played out through the years? Has he led you, was what he was saying in the beginning where he was leading you?
Yeah, basically, the path has been exactly as he said on day one, really. Just I didn't believe any of it. So when I first spoke to him, I was basically doing it. I'd done like a Reiki session. So I'd done Reiki 1 and 2 and then did Reiki Master. And at the end of the attunement, the lady Anne that was working with me had her hands over my head and she said, I'm just going to attune you now to the energy of Reiki Master so you can teach it effectively. And as she finished, she said, Oh, I've got this Chinese chap that's just walked in. I was like, okay. And she's saying his name's Chen. I'm like, okay, cool. What's that got to do with me? Because I had no idea what we were talking about really. And she said, oh, he's your guide. And he's saying that he's going to be working with you from now until you die, basically, as a psychic surgeon. I didn't even know what a psychic surgeon did or was. And I said to her, well, that's nice. Can you let him know that I'm really busy? I don't have time for that. And I don't even know what psychic surgery is. So that was how we ended the conversation. And of course, he laughed like all day after that because obviously he realized that, my path, that conversation was starting. And then when I went to meditation groups every week, I'd see his face. I'd start talking to him. We'd start having conversations and I'd relay that into the group. So I was channeling for probably a good year, talking through him. And then he said, I want to take over. I'd like to come in now and take over your body. And I was like, ooh, not so sure about that because I don't really know who you are because I've just been talking to this voice and seeing the images that he presented for a year really. So I don't know if I want you taking over particularly, but over the course of time, he talked me into joining a trance mediumship group. And then every week we would sit down and we were all practicing letting the guides in. And of course, week by week by week was going by, and I'd get to the point I'd start to lose conscious awareness and I'd panic, and then I'd bring myself back, and that would be the end of the week. So that would be my turn kind of finished. And then this had gone on for months. And then one week I said to Jane when I left, right, if I come back and it's not me, it's this geezer called Chen, basically, because I'm going to let him in this week. Whatever happens, I'm just going to say over to you. So I'm going to do it, sort of thing. So I kind of set my mind that, right, go to the trance group. My friend Paul that ran the group, I said, right, Chen's coming in. I'm going to give him full access. And if he doesn't leave, you guys are going to need to do something and talk to Jane, basically. So, of course, it was fine. That week I sat down, just relaxed. Okay, you can come in. He literally took over, and I just had no recollection. The moment he came in, I just saw his face come in sort of front of me, and I just didn't remember anything. And literally, he stood up, walked around the room, spoke to everybody,
Wow.
used my hands and things, and then sat down. So when I came back, everyone sat there white as sheets, just staring. Like he came in and spoke to us all, basically. So, and he sort of gave, addressed me from there on in. Really, this is what we were going to do. We were here to provide information to people, to work as a psychic surgeon, and to help to heal people from various things. But one of the things he said right from the get-go was, we're going to specialize in removing negative energy, which I didn't know what that meant really at the time. And of course, that meant effectively we started to have people that were hearing voices, intrusive thoughts, suicidal, schizophrenic turn up to the small shed that I worked in. And he'd put his hands on them and then talk to demonic entities and things that were negative and basically get them to leave. So it was kind of, it was a ride that I wasn't really expecting at all.
Wow. Yeah, no doubt.
And obviously it came with a few scary parts too.
I was going to say, it's not like, okay, she didn't say she's doing the Reiki thing. Like, okay, you're going to be, exercising demonic energies through psychic surgery. You would have gone, what?
Yeah, I'd probably run the other way, Barbara, really. I thought,
Exactly. And I
right,
think that over the course of my life, I can see now that I'm this age and look back that they started out with the music very young, to get me in that space. And then with Eunice and the antenna, and then they sort of said, well, you can call us angels. And that was a whole unfolding. And that was really where conflict revolution was born, and then revealing Einstein. And in 2005, which was the 200-year anniversary of E equals MC squared, I thought, hey, let's do a little book just with Einstein. Let's just see what he'll say. I had no idea. And he actually delivered a unified field theory with maps of human consciousness and a scientific, quantifiable definition of compassion as the fifth fundamental force of the universe, and the center and the source is in the center of the earth, and it's like a black hole. And it was all of this incredible information that in 2005 I was like, I'm not a science. I mean, I didn't go to college. I'm not a scientist. So I was like, am I going to have to stand up on a stage someday and tell the world that the Einstein I'm talking to says the source of everything is in the center of the earth and it operates like a black hole?
right, yeah,
And so last year, when I stood there and delivered that and told that actual story, like three people leapt up and went, yes, it's a black hole. Yes, it's in the center of the earth. And I thought, I've been vindicated. It's taken this long, and I just turned 71. So it's
right, yeah.
taken this long in my life to finally be able to say, I'm pretty sure it's Einstein. And my life has been so fantastical in a way that I never went out to create. I just wanted to be a rock star, and all of this stuff, kept happening to me, and it led me over here. And so that's what I'd say to people listening who are interested in doing this. It's it's a journey that you can't anticipate, especially if you surrender to it with your skepticism. But when you do that, it's that balance of skepticism and open mindedness. Okay, let's see. Well, let's see what it is. Then I just think the most magical things take place that so much greater than the power of just the one of us.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a wonderful path to be on because you don't know what's coming, and if you did, you'd probably run the other way. So just looping back to Einstein. So why do you think Einstein kind of picked you, so to speak, or do you think you picked each other, or was it just a kind of synchronistic meeting energetically? What do you think, or do you think you are Einstein in a energetic way, or
I don't think I'm Einstein reincarnated. He always has said that he's not going to reincarnate because there's so much he can do in this state. You can be everywhere at once, like gravity. And um, when the girls asked, "Who are you?" and they said, "We're you can call us angels." These angels, wink, wink, because I'm fairly sure Einstein was in this group. Said this is what they told us. They said we have this theory about how humans can resolve conflict first within themselves, where the byproduct will be world peace. And we needed real humans to test this theory of ours. And you and Kim and Teresa volunteered and were chosen to be that group. And so we're going to give you this information and hope you use it on your conflicts. And at that time, we were so high with, how it is. You get into a new thing and you're discovering all this stuff and things are changing and transforming. And we were all excited. And then we had a first conflict and we had to sit down at a table and deal with it. And halfway through the session, which was quickly getting out of hand, I said, hey, listen, we've got a transcript. Let's go see what it said, because this is our mission, right? Okay. If you're involved in a conflict, the root of your part of it is within you. And that statement was so simple, and yet it like made my head whip around like, what? Because I was always blaming everybody else and projecting onto people, and I had pretty quick temper. And so we were able to turn the entire conversation away from this, you did this and you did that, into me coming to the table saying, you know what, here's what I can do better. And Kim coming to the table, here's what I can do better. And us having a completely different outcome of it. And that was really where conflict revolution was born, from our very real experiences. So if you flip up to, then you jump ahead to Einstein. Well, in real life, Einstein's big burning question was how to stop war. And
Mm.
so when he got in afterlife, it would make sense that he, and who else but Einstein, would die, go over to afterlife, figure it all out, and then find a way to get three women to do his work for him. And I don't know why. I often say, remember Barbara Walters? She was a famous U.S. journalist who was always interviewing the most famous people. And I often thought, I wonder if she ever asked herself, why did I get to be Barbara Walters and interview all the presidents and all the movie stars? And I don't know if she knew either, and I don't know, but I'm just awfully humbled that I am.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because this is the thing, when we look at people that channel their guides, different people channeling different guides, it's like, who picked who? And it was probably picked before, I think from me and Chen, certainly, I know his opinion is, we agreed that as a contract. He always says to me, you can't get out of this because I've got the contract, basically, that you agreed to before you came in. And we always have this little joke. So I say, look, I'm tired, I'm fed up, I need some time off, or we joke about it. He says, you can't, I've got my contract, you're going to have to carry on. And I guess that is
Exactly.
the thing. So on some level, you probably were contracted to, to move the information, because I think this is the key. And we're kind of aligned, I think, in that way. When I read your website and the things that you're doing, it's different wording, but very similar to us. That Chen's teaching to me is that we have to all raise our vibration, and to do that, we have to get rid of fear and negativity and anger, all the low frequency emotions, the pains, the trauma. So to do that, we have to kind of work through our own conflict, as you said, to clear our field, and then our vibration comes up. And as our vibration comes up, so the places that we live, our footsteps on the planet change the vibration of where we stand, because that brings the vibration up. So this whole world peace thing has to happen with everyone changing themselves. Whereas we look to our world, we don't, other than you and I guess, but other people look to world leaders to change things, but they're never going to change anything because they're part of the problem, and they're part of the orchestrated energy, if you like. But people changing themselves, if we all do that globally and the vibration comes up, then of course this low vibration can't stay on the planet, and that's how we drive to a place of kind of peace and love for everyone. Really, is that your kind of version, effectively?
Exactly. And I think what you're calling the low vibration to in our model is that these things get stuck in us. Like fear is a natural thing. Fear in and of itself is not the thing that hurts us. It's when it gets stuck in us and it gets stuck in our energy. And then with our model, because we have these three human dimensions that we work with: intellect, intuition, and emotion. So you have the emotion of fear that gets abscessed because we don't let it come out, because we've been told it's so, but nobody wants to feel it anyway. It's never fun to feel those things. And then we suppress them and then they get worse. But there's also thoughts of fear. And those are kind of they work together, but they're in our model, they're kind of two different energies, so that we can deal with the emotion of fear to release it, like with breath work or like you do Reiki or what Chen does. And then it's a different skill set to deal with the thoughts of fear. Oh my gosh, they did this to me, or they're going to do this, or they're going to do that. So the emotion of it is very specifically energetic. There's no thought, there's no definition of it. It's just the experience of it. And then it marries itself to the thoughts of fear, and it becomes the projections of what then creates the reality. So yes, imagine when people all over the world are going, wait a minute, if I get rid of my fear, if I integrate it and we have an operating system now. So when it comes up, I can deal with it in a regenerative way. So it becomes a higher level part of it. That's going to change what's happening around me, like the wars and the everything that we're dealing with. I absolutely 100% believe that. And Einstein's unified field theory and all of the stuff that he gave me is his theoretical proof of why it works that way. Why when we do this here, it changes what manifests around us into the higher good.
It's a really good way to explain it, actually. And I think, like you said, I think everyone can do this. This is the whole, um, well, the understanding and the teaching, I guess, from everyone in the spiritual realms is everyone has a different way to present the conversation, but ultimately everything is some energy that's negative, locked into some fear or trauma or abuse that people have been through, and releasing and letting that emotion go clears the energy field, and then your vibration changes. And when you kind of realize that, you start to realize, well, this is how I manifest things in my life. So, we've probably been doing it wrong most of our lives because the teaching system isn't particularly good. But when you want something, I now build it in my mind first, exactly what I want, basically, or how I want things to be. And then effectively know that as you build that, you're bringing that energy in and you're building, manifesting something on the kind of astral plane. And that will then manifest in the physical in whatever way it takes for that to happen. And that can happen through other people or people come to you. And it's when you kind of get your head around it, you think this is just like, it's easy to do actually. It's just that we all look at it the wrong way. So we're all living in this fearful place with shortage and lack of money, lack of funds, frightened of war because the war media machine is always running because most of our corporations require war to pay people to work generally in most countries. So the whole kind of system needs to be turned upside down and changed completely, I think, really. And to do that, that starts with each individual person, and everyone has a responsibility to sort themselves out and as you say, to clear that kind of inner conflict, which I think is and should be quite easy to do, really. And I think there are more and more people teaching their versions of this. Now you've obviously got your version. We kind of teach something similar, but our kind of version. And I'm sure there's lots of other people in the spiritual realm teaching their version. So I think it feels like we are at this precipice of enormous change, just getting people online and finding a place that they can connect to a community together where we can actually join everyone seems to be the key thing.
And I think it's actually going much better than we would give it credit for. I was telling someone the other day how what we're seeing around us, all of this revealing, right? It's mortifying what we're learning. And yet, if you're sick, you're going to get sick, you're going to have some fever that's going to throw off the toxic elements that's in us. And I think that's what's going on. And all those methodologies like yours and mine and everyone else's fits into what Einstein has said, that compassion is the fifth fundamental force of the universe, is this, it's synergy. So when we tap into our compassion, we're actually tapping into this enormous energy of compassion with everyone across the planet who is also dedicated to compassion and love. And we don't know how much we're tapping into. There's so much of it and more and more. So even though we're seeing some pretty horrific things, we're also experiencing this resurgence of love and compassion and community in individuals that then, like you said, it's then your family, right? And then within the family, it's, within the community, you can influence it. So it's growing up and outward rather than from the top down. Like you said, the leaders aren't going to do it ever.
No, and it's not their place to do it, of course, because they're in the places that they're choosing to be because of what they're believing and what they're connected to. But everything's got to come from bottom up. And I think that's kind of, it almost feels to me like we need, like everything, you need to be in a dark place and want change to get that light turned on. And then when we turn the light on, we start to see these, as you say, this narrative that we start to hear about in the media, which we all know is happening behind the scenes. I don't think anyone's kind of, been cloaked enough to not believe that there's all sorts of pretty bad things going on behind closed doors, really, in the upper echelons of power. We know it's happening, but no one's actually talking about it, therefore we don't have to think about it. But when we bring that into everyone's conscious awareness, which is what's happening now, people are horrified by what they're hearing and seeing, and that will then produce change. So it's kind of the best thing because you've got to motivate people, and people that are generally lethargic and in their kind of groove, and they're tired and don't have much money, or they've got stress of work and families, aren't really motivated to make change. But sometimes you do need to show pictures that aren't particularly positive to get that motivation, and then get them onto the kind of railway track and say, look, everybody else is going in this direction, hop in the back, let's kind of do it together. And suddenly you become a community, which doesn't actually take long to build, really. And I think that is the inspirational part of where we are as humanity now on this journey. So many people are coming online and pointing the signposts. We're going this way. We're all going a slightly different way, but we're going forwards. And that's the change I think that we're starting to manifest.
And I have one of my favorite authors' name is Matthias Desmet. He's I think he's Belgium. I can't remember, but he wrote a book called The Psychology of Totalitarianism. And in it, he explains about this kind of formation, this mass formation that we get into. And aside from some, horrible totalitarianism, it's also just how I think culture works, is that there's generally about 40% of the people who kind of go along to get along. And then there's 20% who are the ones who want to control. And then there's another 20% who are the ones who want to be free. And when they start to propagandize us, you don't want to be out of that 40% group, because then you'll be ostracized. And so as the change starts to take place, suddenly a new group, the 20%, starts to grow bigger incrementally as one by one people start to have their own minds and get in touch with who they are. And then that growth makes it safe for the others who don't are so skeptical or are subsumed by the propaganda to not feel like if they step outside the norm that they'll be persecuted, that is this group of people who are loving and compassionate, who will welcome them in an entirely new way. And I'm really excited. I've been studying propaganda for a couple decades now, and I just think all that's going on in the world is breaking the spell of what we've been under.
Yeah, I think it's really good. Well, it's your website, what you do, World Peace Challenges, all of the words, you just think, this is what needs to happen. This, people like us but someone has to lead these things, don't they? So there has to be someone that turns the light on to start with for other people to kind of follow behind and feel empowered. And then the more people stand up, then the more you kind of get that snowball to the top of the hill sort of effect, really, which is the key thing. So what have you seen that kind of instrument? I mean, you've been doing this a lot longer than me, but have you seen that kind of instrumental change over the last 10, 15 years, that it must have been quite hard trying to get this peace initiative, off the ground to start with, because
It's
we had the kind of CND world, didn't we, before that, back in the 80s, and it was campaign against nuclear, disarmament, that kind of thing. So I guess you've been through that whole journey, have you really?
and the back then when I started doing the groups in the 90s and doing conflict revolution, um, I would say probably 20% of my clients would have their aha moment. And then 40% of them would go, wow, that's really interesting. And then the other 20% would be like, this is just a bunch of bunk. And as time has passed, I would say there's probably 95% of people who have their aha moment. And the idea back then that emotion was a part of physical illness was such an outside idea, even in the spiritual community. And now it's just a given, and it's in medical as well. I mean, so I'm super excited. I know things can look a little dicey at times, and I've been following the UK and certainly all around the world, but the US is we're going through our own stuff. But I just have so much hope that at our roots that we're becoming fundamentally more human.
Yeah, I think that is the thing, isn't it, really? I think, when you're on this path and you look around and you realize that most of it is kind of, a matrix, like the Matrix film, really. Most of it is kind of just a kind of theatrical stage, and you realize you're one of the actors on there. When you actually understand that from a conscious perspective, then the spell is broken, and you can then become something different, and you can be what you want to be, and say things that you believe, whilst staying away from some of the more difficult conversations. Because these days with social media, we have to be a bit careful about how we cover things, but we can still talk about those conversations in different ways effectively. But I think that's the whole thing. I think that's, from my perspective, I think we're seeing this massive light coming on all over the world, really. And I talk to people every day, as I'm sure you do, and you think so many young people are on, they're motivated, they're consciously aware the spell's kind of been broken and they want change and they want positive change, and that then will manifest something different. And sometimes the old systems need to break and fail before new things can come forward. And I think it sort of feels to me we're at that precipice, really, that the old system is dead already, just that we haven't noticed, or some of us have, but maybe most people haven't noticed. But there is something new kind of coming up from under the ground effectively, that we're just starting to see the shoots of, and that is, a completely different mindset, different people. And the youngsters are different. We've got kind of a 3-year-old grandchild, and he's just different. Won't do as he's told. He won't comply with anything. I talk to Jen and say he's so difficult, and Jen said, "Yeah, this is the new model. This is human version too. They won't comply to anything. They won't do as they're told. He's got his own mind." But Chen said, they're coming at things from an energy perspective. So when you speak to them, if you speak to them with authority, they just push you straight back and say no. But if you speak to them lovingly with truth and say, look, let's sit down and talk about things, you get a completely different reaction. And he's only 3, and I've noticed already that the old authoritarian version of parenting doesn't work with these new version 2s, really, that seem to be popping up.
Well, and I think one of the biggest things for me of seeing that the old systems are coming down is what happened uh, last week or whenever in UK with the monarchy. I mean, I never thought I would ever see in my life anything that threatened the monarchy that way. And who knows what's going to happen with it. But to me, it was just a sign that the old is coming down and the new inevitably is going to rise from those children, too.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is the thing. I think, the energy has changed, and the energy now doesn't support these old authoritarian, kind of families, methods, companies, corporations. And Chen's been saying to me for years that companies that run in the old way with authoritarian control and doing the wrong things in the wrong way energetically will fail. And the new companies that are going to be successful are ones that work with their employees, that are humble, that treat people properly with the right kind of ways to work. So again, companies that are coming at things from a truthful, positive perspective will flourish. But some of these old corporations are going to fail because they're still based in old, controlling, negative energy, and they don't treat their staff in the right way, and therefore energetically the staff aren't aligned with the companies or the products. So they can only fail really from a kind of spiritual perspective.
And the way that I was raised from when I was a girl back in the day of, you grew up, you went to college, you got married, you had children, you did this, you did that. And none of that is applicable. Not that people won't do that, but it's just there's so much more potential and direction. And I think too, with the corporations is that people out of necessity come together. I'll just use the word small business. People are learning how to be, I guess they call it the gig environment or the gig mentality where you don't get a job, you have revenue streams. And I've always been that my whole life. I never was somebody who went and got a job and worked for those things. But now I see it's kind of just the way it is. And that's so liberating to be able to create your own, even if it's just a sole proprietor or small business, or I work with a union. It's a worker owned cooperative, which is really a great model. So, yeah, there's a lot of change.
Yeah, I think that well, that is the change, isn't it? The change is to do something you're passionate about and you love means you'll put, we all have to wake up in the morning and go to work to earn money, don't we? So, but to wake up in the morning, go to work and do something you love is a very different energy to waking up in the morning, going off to a kind of, a rat race for some big corporation that don't really, align with you, don't look after you, don't really care if you come to work or not particularly. And I think that is part of the change, isn't it? It's going back to the almost back to the sort of 1920s, really 30s, where it was, like you said, small industry, people working for themselves, almost like the bartering version of life, really.
And hopefully it'll be like the chrysalis. That's my metaphor I always use. You know, you have the caterpillar is disintegrating in the chrysalis. So it's all coming down, but at the same time, the butterfly is being built in this. So one is coming down and one is coming up. So it's not just an entire crash where everything is destroyed and then we have to rebuild. I think it's happening simultaneously.
Yeah, I think so. I think it certainly feels like that. I mean, I haven't been on social media for years, particularly, but Jane and you have to be on social media to do this type of work because it's where everyone is effectively. So the audience that wants to adopt and see what you do and talk to you is on social media. But we've seen a big change in that over the last 2 or 3 years, whereby it used to be potentially quite fun and quite good, and now it just feels like you're the target for these continual adverts of companies trying to sell you things you don't want generally, and it feels like your kind of data's being used as kind of an offensive method against you to a certain degree, really. So I think that I sort of feel like there's going to be new things that are going to pop up that these big, huge corporations and social media companies won't be able to offer. And again, you move into more of a grassroots place really from a certainly from a spiritual angle, which will be quite interesting. And of course, that gives entrepreneurial people the opportunity to think out of the box and do something different rather than think about creating a huge, big, complex social media network and pulling everybody in. I think again, diversity probably is the answer, really.
Well, that and using our God-given mystical powers. I like to look at my social media as a library, and I intend that the right people are going to come to my library and get it and keep it safe in from all of that kind of harassment. And I get just what I need.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it, actually, Barbara. That's been good. I think it's quite a good way probably to close this down, really. I think it's been, from my perspective, amazing conversations. Great to hear your kind of history, and I was really interested to know, the how it happened for you, how you found that journey, and kind of where it's taken you. So, as a kind of closing, like ending of the conversation, where do you see yourself being or going effectively? You're just going to continue to kind of walk forward and trailblaze, or is there other things in Barbara's kind of life that are coming forward, really?
You know, it's so interesting because last summer when I did that presentation on the 70th anniversary of Einstein's last words, and I felt like I'd been vindicated and like my whole life had led up to this time and now I could retire. And what it meant to me was not that I was going to quit doing this, but that this drive that I had for all of these years on this mission had shifted into now what can I do for me? Like when you retire, you get to go off and do stuff for you. And so I've been able to I love doing these podcasts because I feel like I can share the years of wisdom that I have in a way that doesn't make me have to get out on the road and keep teaching, I could travel in the world. And although I love that and will do that, but I see my presence just as a continued kind of a stake in the ground with Einstein. I think the work that I've done has been really phenomenal and has helped change the whole nature of what we do. I feel that contribution. And so I've asked the universe to just send me where I need to go. And I've been meeting just the greatest people who are inspire me, and then they get inspired by me, and that's kind of going to be my journey.
Perfect. So you're still sort of doing conferences. Obviously, I noticed that you had the spirituality conferences, and is that something you enjoy and that is part of that path?
I do. And unfortunately, the Science of Consciousness conference was canceled this
Yeah,
year
yeah, I saw that.
because of some unfortunate stuff that happened, but whatever. Uh, as to the best of my ability, I'm having a in March a presentation at the International Conference of Spirituality and Psychology, but I videotaped my presentation because I couldn't get to Bangkok,
Yeah, it's Thailand, isn't it? Yeah.
Thailand. It
Yeah,
was like, darn, but I'm going to keep pursuing that. And I just love it. People invite me to come and do what I do, and I follow spirit where it guides me. And I'm going to be doing this the rest of my life, which hopefully
perfect.
will be quite a long time.
A long time. And it never ends, doesn't it? Jane said to me a while back, said, "Do you think we'll ever retire?" I said, "I don't know. I'll ask Chen." And he said, "No, basically." He said, "You'll be doing this until your last breath." Okay.
It's right. You can say you're going to retire, but you're not.
No, I think we just slow down and take different directions and maybe do things differently. But I think, like you say, it's quite, for you, you're quite inspiring to me. So I look and think, oh, I'm 50, now I'm 57. I think, well, I've got, another 20 years probably of this type of work. Where's that path going to go? Where does that adventure go? And what do we want to do on it, really? So that is the kind of fun part, isn't it? That we never know what
We
we're
never know.
going and what's coming in, really.
And my
And
parents lived to be 90, mid 90s. So
right. Wow.
get
Yeah, so
ready.
you've got good genes then, Barbara, basically. Which helps, of course, doesn't it?
Uh-huh. And listen, for your listeners, if they want to go to my website at barbarawith.com and use the code Einstein40, and you can get 40% off a reading if you want to come and experience the wonder of Einstein's.
Perfect. I'll put that out on our social media as well, actually, Barbara. So we'll try and drive some traffic to you, which would be great.
Okay.
Do you do that live over Zoom, or do you just record it and send it, or how do you do your?
No, we do it in live in a
Oh,
Zoom
like two, yeah,
together.
two people. Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
nice, actually. And that's the beauty of Zoom, I guess, isn't it? That, again, you don't have to be sat together in the same room. You can do that across the world, which would be great.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay,
Well,
so just to remind everyone, Barbara's website is barbarawith.com. Einstein 40 is the magic coupon code that we can pop in, which is really very kind of good of you to offer that obviously level of discount because it is pretty good for sure. So for anyone that was thinking about or interested in a reading from Barbara, head over there and get yourself booked up. And from my perspective, lovely to chat, well, to meet you, Barbara, and to talk to you. It's been great, really. So we'll pop this podcast out and then we'll obviously connect behind the scenes, which will be lovely.
yes, and please give my greetings to Jane.
I will do, thank you. And obviously your lovely assistant that helps. I suppose
Claire,
you've got a lot of assistants in the background, probably. Cool.
she's
Okay,
good.
Barbara. Well, you take care.
All right. Thank
Very
you,
much.
Andy.
Catch you again. Cheers. Bye bye.